Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Happily Never After. I'm Kate.
And I'm Jay. We're here. We're working on turning the page to spousal loss.
So, this week we have a pretty interesting topic that is somewhat not really discussed openly, I feel like, in the widowhood community. There's a huge concept when you have kids as a widow or a widower that you are roped in with those single parent households. But I'm actually more comfortable with the term solo parent. And being a solo parent is not having that extra set of hands that you, even sometimes as a single parent, find that you have. Jay, what are your thoughts on the term of solo parent versus single parent?
I think it's the perfect term because you, what's interesting is in a single parent household, you know what? Even if, like you said, the father or the mother is a deadbeat parent, you can always still yell at them, call the police, call DIFUS, call somebody. When you are a solo parent because your wife or husband's passed away, you don't have that extra set of hands to call on. You don't have an outside source to kind of force someone to make a decision. You have to deal with it yourself, no matter what. I mean, you may have, other family or friends and things like that can offer you assistance,
Sure, but it's not
but
the same.
it's not.
My parents have been super supportive and been a great extra set of hands, but it's not the same. It's not that co-parent that you have
Right.
even in a divorced household. Those relationships might not be good parenting relationships, but there's something to be said about, just not having, hey, I need to run to the grocery store down the street for 5 minutes, or hey, I need to take a shower by myself, or
Right.
like, especially with me, like my kids are little, like there's no respite from that. It is mom mode 24/7, 365. And what that does to like my mental health, my physical health, like as you can tell, I'm a little under the weather this week, fighting something that one of the kids must have brought home from school or something. They're hotbeds for the plague.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're at the age where your kids rather are at the age where, you know, they're at school and school is kind of like the green zone,
Oh my god. It's
and
like a petri dish. It's like sending
yes,
them off into a biohazard space every day.
I mean it's bananas. It's just like, I mean, I'm lucky in that respect because again, my kids are older and one of my daughters lives out of state. you know, the younger one, I mean, she goes, work, things like that. So of course, you could always have something like
A little bit
that,
different when they're an
but it's
adult, though.
different,
But
you
you have your
know.
own challenges, even still, like, it doesn't matter that they're over 18, like, you're still in solo parent mode, like, I'm sure you have your own challenges and stuff with the girls now.
Well, constantly. Listen, as a parent, as a surviving parent, you are always feeling responsible for something. And it doesn't listen, my kids, and just like our kids can be 30. And you know what? We have a feeling of a responsibility for them. One, because for X amount of years, it's only been us.
Mm,
It provides a different form of attachment.
once a
You
parent,
know,
always a parent.
Yeah, and not saying a two-parent household is any different, just saying that there is a different level of bonding when you are a solo parent.
Well, there
Because
has to be. That
yeah,
intrinsic
absolutely.
loss that happens, like, your kids then even if it doesn't matter if they're 3, 13, or 33, like, once they lose one of their parents, there's a fear in them, and they become bonded to you because they become protective of you and worried about you, and so, like, how they're attached to you shifts after the other parent dies, and that changes how you parent them.
And it's funny that you said that because like my 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 daughter, my youngest one, she's taking her outside. She's looking at different colleges, all around. And the biggest college that I want her to go to is UT because it's right here. And it's
Neighborhood
a
school to you, yep.
and not only that, it's a great law college. But she's like, you know what, Daddy? Listen, I want to go to UT. That'd be a great opportunity. But if I don't get into UT and I get into some school in Connecticut or some school in Massachusetts or Chicago, I want to go there. And I had to tell myself, look, you gotta go.
Mhm.
You gotta go. And because I am not going to apprehend you from the opportunity
But that's a
to,
hard pill to swallow because we've also experienced that loss, and then to be able to
right.
it's hard enough as a parent to understand that that empty nest thing is coming. I always tell
Yes.
my teenager, like, we get into squabbles and stuff, I'm like, "Listen, my job as your parent is to set you up to leave and never come back." That is how I
Right.
know I've done my job successfully as a parent, is I have set you up in a way where you can leave the house and be on your own and stand on your own 2 feet and not need to come back. Now the door is always open if you need to come back. I love you and I will always be your mom, but I've done my job successfully if you can leave and not have to come back.
Right. Right.
So we as
Well,
parents have to accept that, like, they may leave and never come back.
you know what's
And we have
funny?
these losses, and now we have to accept, like, "Oh god, that's a reality. I've not just been telling them stuff, but, like, there's a potential."
Well, okay, again, in my what I do professionally is, like I said, I look at grief in every aspect. And what's interesting is empty nest syndrome is one of the biggest forms of grief that is not identified.
Really?
Because what happens is a lot of, like what you just said, everyone expects to have done such a perfect job that their kid doesn't have to come back. But then guess what? After 5 years of them being gone, and you've raised them all your life, you now miss them.
Mm,
And so now the role is reversed. And it's not like they don't miss you, but then they're like, you know what? I got this party to go to. I'm hanging out with my girlfriend. Me and the boys want to go to Europe.
mm.
Mom, Dad, you have to understand. And so now the parent is like, yeah, but what about Christmas? They're like, well, for Christmas, I'm going to hang out with my people. You're
Yep.
like, well, hold on. Again, so that's why I say empty nest syndrome. It's one of those griefs that no one recognizes until they're in the throes of it.
Do you think that, like, the widowhood experience exacerbates that potentially? Like, for
Absolutely.
you, your girls were teenagers when you became a widower. So then when they both are old enough to, like, move on, then it's really a lone feeling, and that amplification of that lack of dependency that they don't have for you anymore. Do you think that that was amplified by being a widower?
Oh, absolutely. Because see, in my situation, when my wife died, the very next year, my oldest daughter went away to college.
Mm,
And, you know, with that being the case, you're a parent and you've been dealing with managing the solo parenting. And now you have to manage. My daughter went 6 hours away, happened to go to the same college that I met my wife.
how
And
funny is that?
I know it. But
That must have
now
been a head trip within itself.
it was crazy for me, but that's a whole nother conversation because trust me, that one can get long. But the fact that she was 6 hours away and I couldn't put my hands on her, you
Yeah.
know, if she needed something, it made it more difficult because now as a solo parent, you feel like if they need something that you can't provide, you are a failure.
Mm,
Not that you actually failed. It's just the feeling in your mind,
because you
you
just
know.
finally found your footing of doing it on
Right,
your own,
right,
but then there's a whole it's like as soon as you learn to, like, walk, you're being expected to run, and then you learn to run, and it's having to start all over again, It's just that continued back at square one feeling. I know that because like, I don't know what it's like to be a teenage boy. I have no idea what that's like, but I'll tell you what, we're having some conversations with my
well,
son that I never thought I would have to have, and then I get mad at Craig for, like, not being here. Like, I am grateful that they had the birds and the bees talk, like, it very serendipitously happened, like, right before a couple months before Craig passed away, where they had just naturally had that conversation one day when I was
right.
at work. So I didn't have to do that whole spiel. But recently we're having to have some conversations about like I don't even know how to say this delicately. Like he's taking photographs of certain parts of his body and or thinking about taking photographs of certain parts of his body and
But
wanting to share that with some very special
with
female friends of
yeah,
his. And I'm like, first of all, nobody wants to see that. Second of all, once it's out there forever. And third of all, God damn you, Craig, I should not be having to talk to my 14, almost 15-year-old son about dick pics. Like, no,
but you
this
know
is his
what?
job. I don't want to do this.
But let me tell you something, Kate. Here's what's crazy. The stuff that we think is bananas, this generation has become receptive to it. Like, like the whole dick pic, titty shot, all that. It's crazy because it's like their whole thing is they want to do it, but they want to do it to make sure they don't get caught. And that makes them cool. If they get caught, that's a whole different story.
Oh
But
God,
if
don't
they
even
can
tell
get,
me that. I don't wanna know any about that. I told him,
yo,
"So help me God, if I ever find out he's taking those pictures, I will take him from a rooster to a hen in one shot."
I mean, listen, listen, Kate, my biggest thing, my, look,
I mean, I can't even imagine what it's like as a dad with girls, like, you're gonna have to have some conversations.
well, you know what? Here's what is interesting. The girls are 3 years apart, and they can at least have the conversations with each other. And
Yeah,
I'm also my wife. What it wasn't like they were at the age, but my wife didn't have any problem with having that type of conversation with them if they were inquisitive about some things. Like when it was them, uh, going through the menstrual period and stuff like that. My wife was good with showing them those type of
yeah.
things, and I'm
I feel
sure.
like girls get access to that information earlier because there's a potential for that just stuff to start with girls
Right.
earlier. Like, when I had that talk with my mom, I think I was 9.
That's what I'm
Like,
saying.
like, my son didn't have that conversation with my late husband until he was 11. Like,
Right. See,
fine, but, like, I already know, like, my daughter, she's gonna be in 3rd grade, I'm gonna have to talk to her about it, but that's fine. I got the same like, we're playing with the same equipment. Like, I have home court advantage. I don't I know scientifically, like, I passed health class, like, I know what he's
right,
going through and doing, but I don't wanna talk about it. I don't and I it's real hard to, like, have to have a conversation with him like, "Hey, bud, your room kinda stinks. Also, please wash your own sheets." Like,
right.
I don't wanna find the
Well,
crusty sock or none of that.
let me tell you something. Like, for instance, see, my parents were not together, and my mom was definitely not having that conversation with me nor my brother. Me and my brother had to teach each other, and the streets had to teach
Yeah.
us. You know, so I knew that when it was my turn, when I became an adult, and when I had children, I didn't anticipate losing Kim,
Mm.
but when I did, and I had to start having the thoughts of having that conversation. I had to remember what I did not get,
Mm,
to make sure that somehow they got it. And on top of that, I also had to I had to pick and choose carefully who would cascade information, be-
mm.
because I didn't agree with certain people's tactics of things, and I didn't want
Yeah.
to have my children influenced by that just because that person was a woman.
Yeah, I
You know
get
what I'm
that.
saying?
'Cause
So
you want
I
them to get the message delivered from someone they can relate to, but because
right,
that was my biggest concern. I was like, "I don't know if my son is even gonna hear what I'm saying because he's probably so freaked out that his mom said penis at him." Like, he's gonna
right.
like, he's a 14-year-old boy, he doesn't wanna hear his mom say those words, like, so he's just deaf to it, he's blind to it. So who do I have that I can tap into that it's gonna be the right information delivered in an appropriate way with that, like, relatability, and I love my dad, don't get me wrong, but he's a man of a certain generation, and he's
Right.
not the most touchy-feely emotional guy, so I don't know that he's the best one to deliver it, and, like, his other grandfather, like, he's a little bit more staunch, and so, like, probably wouldn't have that conversation because it wouldn't be appropriate, and, yeah, like, my brother-in-law could do it, but he's a big jokester, and I'm like, "I don't know
Right.
that I want it to be led with a joke filter." So I'm like, "All
Right.
right, well, guess it's me. Better draw on a fake mustache and, like, go to
Well, you
town
know
with delivering this message."
what it comes to, and this is one thing I look. I'm not ashamed to say it. I had to research it. I
Good
had
for
to
you.
find out. You know what I'm saying? Because it's like I didn't have the people around me that I
Mhm.
could trust to help cascade that information.
Mm,
And so I had to use my own, you know, my own style, and but I had to learn what my style was.
mm,
And for me, it was, look, I realized that it came down to being a little bit more, I had to be a little bit more open and accepting of the fact that the girls will be exploring life. I couldn't, let me tell you, I had this one guy that was like, my daughters, yeah, man, they ain't gonna do that. He had two daughters. I ain't gonna do, yeah. Well, one of his daughters, one
Denial
of,
ain't just a river in Egypt, my
no,
friend.
it was it was like one of his daughters ended up becoming a lesbian. It was no problem, but it
Sure.
was like her being freer. He didn't want to accept that, you know.
Hmm.
And his other daughter, well, she just loved boys. We'll just say that.
Oh, okay.
And a big part of that was because daddy made this false sense in his mind that his daughters were absolute angels
Mm,
instead of having the conversations of reality. And the whole thing is like, what were you when you were that age?
right?
So think about yourself a little bit. So now when you are now at the point where you're having these type of conversations with your children, and it doesn't matter if you're a solo parent, single parent, or dual parent, you know, it's about understanding that you can't have rose colored glasses. You know,
It's a very hard concept to accept that our children will become sexual beings.
yes.
Just like
And
our children have to accept that we are sexual beings, because
right,
not for
right.
nothing, I'll be transparent. My teenage son overheard me and my boyfriend the other evening, and that was an awkward conversation the next morning, but it opened the door for us to have other conversations about, like, you're gonna be 15 and you're dating and you're like, let's it it's not an uncomfortable conversation, and we didn't certainly go into detail about it, but to have to come to him and humble myself and be like, "Yep, that happened." Like,
Right.
it's eye-opening, and I'm sure for you going the other way, like, I'm sure there's been times with the girls where you've been
Yep.
like, "I don't wanna know, I don't wanna think about it, I don't wanna," like, you were telling me something
And
recently, I think, right?
well, I mean, put it this way, yeah, and it's like, you know what? And the thing about it is, look, you have to trust that you have instilled in them all of the information and the decisions that they make are going to be prudent decisions. And the truth of the matter is, it was interesting because my daughter said, you know, Daddy, I don't want to lie to you. That's how she started the
Ooh,
conversation. So
that's like
that's how,
a knife to the gut.
actually, no, it wasn't, because you know what? It was it was that sign of maturity,
Okay.
which was totally different, because guess what? Most kids would have lied to their parents. And the fact that
Mm,
she said, you know what, Dad, I don't want to lie to you. This is what I'm going to do, which let me know that she had trust in me.
that's huge.
And so now I had to reciprocate and be like, okay, you trust me. Now I have to trust you. And so she
And those
kind of,
words taste like
right.
vinegar just a
Oh
little
my
bit.
God. So she kind of set me up in that respect. But you know what?
I love it.
But it was a good setup, because it was a setup that started to create a plane of equidistance.
Mm.
You see what I'm saying? Like, you trust me, Daddy? I trust you.
And
And
that's another huge realization, like, as my son is, gonna be 15 and very mature for his age, always has been, but, like, the grief and the trauma certainly matured him, you know, much faster, I think, like, trauma always extrapolates that maturity trajectory. But to understand and accept like that they're adults or becoming adults and you get to relate to your children as adults is such a wild concept too. And then in the solo parenting, arena, again, I get mad at Craig sometimes or I shake a fist. I'm like, you are supposed to be here for me to celebrate this with, or like bang my head against the wall when he just isn't hearing what I'm saying because he's a stupid teenager. And I mean that with love because we all know that teenage boys are kind of dumb, you know.
yep,
Teenage boys are dumb. I love
yep,
him. I love him with my whole heart and I wouldn't change a thing about it. And he knows all of this. I would never say anything anywhere that I wouldn't say to his face. And I'm
right.
really big on consent, so he knows like this conversation is happening too. Um, but he's dumb as a box of rocks sometimes because he's a teenage boy. And then he has those shining moments where I get to talk to him like he's an adult, and it's bittersweet for me. Like, I'm so proud, but I'm also really sad because there's that secondary loss, that grief that Craig's not here to
Yes,
experience and see that maturity that he had a hand, even before Craig's death, like Craig had a hand in helping him mature, and he's not getting to see the fruits of those labors, and it just makes me so frustrated sometimes. And then when the 2 kids are going at it because there's a 10-year age difference between them, and I haven't
right.
had that minute to just breathe, and then I lose my shit and I throw the remote and everyone starts crying and everyone's like, "Why are you?" I'm like, "Because I'm like a tea kettle
Right.
about to boil over and there's no relief, there's no alleviation of that pressure until I, like, pop off." Like, and
But you know what? The craziest thing is, everybody else can go to war, but then the minute you decide to go to war, all of a sudden everybody looking at you like there's a problem. And
right?
it's like, wait, but you didn't see the 30 minutes of war you guys created before I decided to do something like throw the remote. And when I
And
threw
it
the
took a
remote,
lot. It took a
right,
lot for me to get,
right.
and I always say I go from Mary Poppins to the Dark Knight real quick. I'm like, "Please put your shoes on. Shoes now. Put your shoes on." I'm
Right,
like,
right.
literally
You know,
It's
Well,
a transformation where I'm Jekyll and Hyde, and they all look at me twisted, like, "Well, what the hell are you
but
looking
it's
for, Ma?" And I'm like,
because after the 10th time of asking, then it's like, unfortunately, Darth Vader is the voice that sinks
"Yeah."
in. You
You
know,
gotta, like, dig deep, and then they look at you like you're
yeah.
possessed, and they don't understand why you're talking at them sideways. I'm like, "Have
But
you not been in the same room with me for the last 30 minutes?"
okay, I wanted to say something about because you were talking about this a little while, just a couple seconds ago, the levels of maturity. See, my daughter, my look, my kids are 25 and 22. And what's interesting is I'm happy at the fact that I can actually have real life conversations with them. Like they've had some experience, sure, not experiences, but they've
They've lived a
seen
little.
some things. And it's but inside it's just like what you said. These are times that I wish Kim was here.
Mhm.
Just just to witness what, you know, what she was able to help bring to the
Instill
table
in
with
the
them,
girl.
and
Yep.
and what we as a team were able to help instill into the girls, and to finally say, you know what, we actually did do something good, do something right.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah. The
and
fruits of your labor, right?
it's been
Parenting is no joke. Dual parent,
no,
single parent, solo parent, like, it is a war zone out here, and that whole adage, "It takes a village," I think is so overplayed to the point where, like, we say it so much, but we don't mean it.
we don't
It's become a
at all.
platitude. But then I think about that in terms of, like, the widowhood community, like, it takes a village to raise a child, it takes a bigger village to support a widow or a
Widow.
widower, and
Mhm.
then when it comes to that person having children, like, there is such an underrepresented, opportunity for those kids, like, what they're missing out on. Father-daughter dances, like, those are a
Right.
thing in the town that we're in, and I'm seeing posts about those all over the internet right now, and it makes me cry because 'cause I'm like, "My daughter won't get to do that."
Let
And
me
they're
let
like,
me
"Oh, well, can't she take her grandpa or can't she take her uncle?" I'm like, "She could, but it's not
right,
the same." And
right.
every other little girl there is there with her dad.
Her dad. Okay, let me tell you something, Kate. Okay.
And not for nothing, real quick
Um,
before let me just put things in perspective for you. You said your daughters are how old? 22 and
and
25?
25, yeah.
I got married at 24 to Craig. So just put that in perspective for you.
Okay.
Any day now, your girls could get married. Any day now, you could become a grandpa. Just gonna
Yeah.
throw that out there and make you feel real shitty for a hot second.
Thank you. You know what I'm saying? It's like, but you know what? It
I'm sorry, I had to.
damn it, you made me almost lose my thought. Yeah. But nah, my whole thing was like, I remember like you were talking about the daddy daughter dances and stuff like that. For me, it was like going to the PTA meetings. Sure.
Mhm.
It was like, because see, it was either both parents there or a mother,
Yep.
not a father.
Usually it's
Well,
not a father, yep.
except for me and maybe the one other guy that was raising his kid by himself. And and it's like, we're both looking at each other like, yeah, man, yeah, we gotta be. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well,
And
especially you having 2 girls, you gotta learn how to, like,
yeah,
braid the hair and have the tea parties, and, I mean, they were older, so it wasn't quite like you were playing Barbies and dress up and stuff,
well,
but
with the younger one, his was interesting. She was out of that age of the, like you said, the whole Barbie thing. But she was playing soccer, and
mm,
she was really good. And I got her a scholarship to Brandeis. So
oh, good for
it
her.
was like, but what was interesting was that we had to take her to, like, my wife used to take her to her soccer tournaments and stuff like that. When that became my turn, you know, I had to deal with these things. And then I had to deal with, like, if she had a loss. if she had a loss,
Mm,
I had to
teaching her
address
that
that
graceful
part.
losing. Yep.
Yep. I had to deal with that graceful loss. Now, let me tell you something crazy. My wife was alive when this happened. Both my kids play soccer, and both were really good. My oldest one decided not to go further, but I saw the transition. It ended up being a Venus Serena moment at this
Okay.
point. And the coach, me and my wife were at the soccer game for our high school. And my oldest daughter was playing her position. And well, it just so happened the girl from the other team was just handling her. I
Okay.
mean, handling her. So the coach puts in her sister in that position, and her sister lit the fucking place up.
Oh my Lanta.
And and what was crazy was I'm sitting there, I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Now my wife is sitting there like, do you understand that if you're cheering for one, you're not cheering for the other? And you know, you have to understand that. Hold on. You have to understand that. You have to you so she her whole thing was like, oh, you know, realize that as one is rising, one is declining. And
Mm,
you have to be okay with understanding that you have to have this balance celebration. This baby is okay. And then you have to have the, yeah, baby, you did your thing, all in the same turn of the screw.
yeah.
And
That's a hard thing to do.
you know what? I can say, thank God that did not happen when my wife had passed.
Yeah.
Before my
That would have
wife
been a
had
really hard
passed,
thing to do on your
because
own.
it really would have been incredibly hard. And but again, back to the whole solo parenting aspect of things, what we pick up, what we learn is that we've had to, through osmosis, learn what our spouses did, what they could do. We have to anticipate how they would be, and
Yeah.
we would have to somewhat understand that even though we're putting our own twist on it, it's still we have to we have to give the other parent credit for it. You know what I'm
Absolutely.
saying? And because it is a situation where, let's be honest, half of the things that we're learning to give to them, we've learned from our spouse
Oh my God,
without,
absolutely.
without even um directly having conversation with them.
I
Just
think that was one of the hardest things I ever, like, really had to encounter, and this whole widow thing has been hard, regardless, and the solo parent thing
yeah.
has been hard regardless, but recently, probably maybe, like, 6 months ago, my little one and I were snuggling in bed, and, I had, like, lost my shit after, like, just the 2 kids were just being assholes, like, they were 3 and 13. I said, "I have a three-nager and a teenager," and it was the worst Oreo cookie sandwich I could have been in.
Right.
And it was just one of those days, both talking out the sides of their mouth and rolling their necks a little bit too loud at me, and I took it, and I took it, and I took it, and I tried to just, like, not, and then I blew up, right? And so we're snuggling in bed, and I'm always really good about going to her and apologizing, like, not,
Right.
like, "I'm sorry that I yelled at you," and
Right.
trying
Right.
to just, like, create some resolution because that was something I didn't have growing up. And, I'm like, "I'm really sorry that mommy got so mad at you." And she's like, at 3 years old, she was like, "It's okay, but since daddy's been gone, you yell a lot more." And that, like, hit me like a hot knife in the
Yeah.
heart. And a couple days later, I said to my 14-year-old, I was like, "So so your sister said this to me, and you could see the like look on his face, like he didn't want to.
It was true, you
Yeah,
know.
and so I asked him, I was like, "Listen, like, you're not gonna be in trouble, but, like, but what do you think?" And he was like, "Well, yeah, like, you do, you yell more." And I'm like, "It's not that I, like, beat my kids or yell at my kids all the
Right,
time, like,
right, right.
9 chances out of 10, it's me just hostile negotiation hostage negotiations with
Mm,
them." I can't even speak. But, you know, he's like, "Yeah, like, you do yell a lot more." And I'm like, I'm really sorry for that." He's like, "Well, I understand it because dad was more the disciplinarian than you were."
right,
And I like, that was an epiphany for me too, where I was like, "Oh, so not only am I learning how to solo parent, but I'm also, like, taking over that role that he had." Like, he was the finance guy in our marriage, and he was the stats guy at his job, and he was the disciplinarian in our co-parenting. And
yep.
it was good cop, bad cop, and I didn't ever even really picked up on that because it wasn't an intentional hierarchy, but to know that, like, okay, now to get my kids to do the things I need them to do, I'm having to be both good cop and bad cop, and the kids have picked up on that, and that was, like, awakening for me.
You know what, Kate, let me tell you something. It's so interesting because me and Kim, we saw this when she was alive. Kim, I was the rock. Kim was the feather. And
I
that
like that
was
way of
ex-
phrasing it.
that's exactly how we put it. You know what I'm saying? It's like, yo, because she could calmly address what was going on with the kids. And then she could also see her, she was good. Her threat was, look, you don't really want dad to know how this shit gonna go down. You know what I'm saying?
Wait
Like,
till your father gets
right,
home, yeah.
right. Or like, if you really want, like, mommy has a way to make daddy understand these things
Yeah,
easier. Or, or, you give me a hard time, I'll fuck around, just tell daddy and have daddy just go in.
yeah, you tell me how you wanna play this, like,
You
that's
know what I'm
fine by
saying?
me, right?
And I had to learn, like, I had to learn to be both. Like,
Yeah.
um, I had to learn early that keeping the rock approach to things was not going to get me what I needed when it came to parenting.
Sometimes you gotta be a little bit
Yeah.
stiffer-handed with them, and I
And
don't like to be that
well,
person because
see the
I
whole
was always
thing,
the good cop.
but the whole thing, but see that's the thing. I had to learn how to be the feather. So now there are times where I want to blow the fuck up, but I can't because
Mhm.
if I do, then
You attract
you
more flies with honey than you
right,
do with
right.
vinegar.
So I had to learn how to address that side of things while still understanding how to be a disciplinarian at the same time.
I wonder
You
if
know,
that's typical given, like, the gender roles, like, women more typically tend to be the softer, the feather, and the men more typically tend to be the rock or the bad cop, right? Like, in my household growing up, my mom was the disciplinarian and my dad was the feather, but I understand that that's, like, uncommon, very uncommon.
but you know what? Here's what's interesting. I think that fathers are that way to their daughters. If you're in just a community of
Oh,
daughters,
yeah.
like for me, see, the reason why I had to be kind of the more of a rock situation with the girls was one, I grew up in a single parent household,
Mm,
two boys, and my mom didn't didn't really give me that type of understanding.
discipline.
Then no, she gave me discipline, but it wasn't like see this it wasn't
Sorry, I don't
discipline
mean to
with
laugh, but it's the way
understanding.
you said it. "Oh, she gave me discipline."
It wasn't discipline with understanding.
That sounds like a trauma response.
Yeah, yeah, love my mom to death, but yes, it was a trauma
That was a
response.
triggered response right
No,
there.
but like, and then also, I
Shout out to
also,
Mama Lewis.
you know, it was crazy because like even when Kim died, like see, there were a lot of things with the way Kim was raised that I didn't agree with her parents about.
Mm,
And like for instance, listen, me and Kim came from two different financial worlds. And Kim came from a world where it was all I gotta do is ask and reach out my hand and it's gonna be there. You
mm.
know, I was from a world where I asked and reach out my hand and you lucky you didn't
People
get
look
it
at you
cut
be like, "What's
off.
that for?" Yeah.
Yeah. And what was interesting was that when Kim and I got together, I had to learn how to be more open. Kim had learned how to be more closed. So we
Mm.
had we had to have that. And but I didn't there were methods that her parents had that I didn't quite agree with. And Kim was making the attempt to do the same. I'll give you an example real quick. And this is a clear one. Okay. When Daddy told the secret that Santa wasn't fucking real. Now, it happened. The girls were kind of younger. You know, what ended up happening was me and Kim were wrapping up the presents and the girls saw
Uh-oh.
the presents. And so my wife was like, yeah, Santa gave us these and he was so busy. So I was like, so then I was pissed off because I think that year we had spent way too much money. And I was like,
Ah,
so I was
so you were
like,
already a salty dog
right,
about it.
right. So my whole thing was Santa ain't give a shit. Mommy and daddy worked for these, wrapped it up, and giving it to you. We are Santa. Well,
Mhm.
what was interesting about that was that the girls understood that Santa wasn't real. As a matter of fact, one of my daughters went to school and the kids was talking about Santa, and my daughter was like, Santa not real. And had
Oh,
it like,
no.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But what was interesting was my my wife and my in-laws looked at me funny. Like, how
Mm,
could you say that to them? How could you do that? Like I ruined their innocence.
mm,
And you know what? To a certain degree, I think I did. But I also had to realize that why were we okay with lying to children?
mm.
If
Yeah,
if
that was a
if
hard conversation to have for sure. And Craig
you
was
know,
always of the philosophy of like, oh no, Santa's real. Like even as an adult, like if you said Santa wasn't real, you didn't get any presents. And so, after and it was after Craig passed away that my son stopped believing in Santa. And I had a real hard time with like, oh my God, do I do this in Craig's philosophy or do I do it, in a way that's authentic to me? And I found this
right.
really great thing on the internet that was like, it talked about how Santa isn't a person, but it's an essence. And like, once you know the secret of Christmas, it's now your responsibility to make that holiday magic for other kids and other people. So it's not about it being a person, but it's about it being the spirit of Christmas and like that magic and that
Okay.
seasonal magic. And so like that's how I started it. And then, the next year my son was an ungrateful jerk and we had to be like, I bought you those. Like, because even now having my young daughter, like I don't everyone gives me such a hard time for, like, oh, like, well, you're gonna do Christmas. I'm like, no, Santa did not buy my son the PlayStation. Santa
Mhm.
did not buy my daughter the RC Barbie car that she can drive around the parking lot. No, no. I bought those.
I
Santa
bought it.
brought you socks
Yep.
and underwear and maybe a video game, but I bought you the big gift ones. Like I was like, no, Santa ain't getting credit for that. That's me.
Well, let me
Do
tell you.
you do you think that coming from a single parent household shaped or helped you do the solo parenting thing? Like, in
Yes,
retrospect, do you think that that gave you an upper hand?
it did. Um, and it did for this fact. I actually had to I called my mom one day
Mm,
because I'll never forget the girls were getting on my nerves. And I called my mom and I said, Mom, how'd you do this? Because I'm about to kill these girls. I'm about to kill these bitches. That's a matter of fact, that's the way I said it, you know. And the first thing she said was, you better not lay a hand on those girls. And the
mm,
second thing she said, she was like, look, this is what you need to look at. You need to get out of the house for a moment and
mm.
you need to fix yourself. Because my mom was like, many times I had to get out the house for a moment and I had to come back different.
And I
And she
feel
was
like
like,
we get such scrutiny when we do need to leave the house, because I've certainly had times where I knew I needed to leave the house, and we get such, like, criticism and scrutiny, so I love that she gave you that advice.
well, you know what? I was blessed because the girls both had cell phones. So I and for me, leaving the house was just walking up the street, walking down the street, going to
Yeah,
my
just going for a walk.
neighbors. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't like I was going just bounce. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But you know what? It was getting out. Yes. That became a point of value for me.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? But
Wow.
I
What a
mean,
great conversation this was today. We are
seriously.
at the end of our time together today, so I really
Okay.
appreciate all of your perspective and everything that you brought to this, Jay.
Well, you know what, Kate, I appreciate you allowing me to kind of open up a little bit. I mean, look, first off, we really want to thank all of you guys today for, for just listening to today's show because it's important. Period. It's just important.
If you enjoyed the episode, just make sure you check out our previous episodes. They can be found where your favorite podcast is streaming on all available platforms.
And make sure that you like and subscribe. I mean, because we want to make sure that you get all of our future content as well.
With grief and gratitude, I'm Kate.
And I'm Jay. So until next time.
You've been listening to Happily Never After, part of the Xvadio podcast network. You can catch every episode of Happily Never After, as well as the rest of the network, at xvadio.com, the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.